Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 874B, and today's date is January 22nd, 2016, and the title of the episode is Syrian Peace Talks Postponed. The war moves to the next level. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, out in Moldova, we realize the new government that was put into power decided to appoint someone that was pro-EU. The people did not like this whatsoever, and they started to protest. There were riots. We see they stormed parliament, and we see at this point that Moldova is trying to keep this very, very quiet. They're keeping out the press. They don't want the press reporting on the situation in Moldova. We know the U.S. press is never going to report on this, and there was a Russian team going inside of Moldova, a bunch of journalists, and they basically kicked them out, and they didn't want them in there. And right now, the Russian Foreign Ministry is condemning Moldova's use of restricting media freedom inside their country, and they're calling them out on it. Out in Ukraine, we see that Ukraine troops are firing on Donetsk continuously. They have not stopped whatsoever. They're doing this in Donetsk western suburb. They're trying to provoke the southeastern people into firing back. But what's more interesting is that we understand that Ukraine, with the U.S., they want to control the Black Sea. And right now, Ukraine is teaming up with Turkey, who controls the Bosphorus under the Montreux Convention, the inlet that allows ships to go in and out of the Black Sea. They're working with Turkey right now, and they're going to join forces to basically patrol and control the Black Sea. And they want to keep a balance of power in this region, because we know that Russia, they are a state sponsor on the Black Sea. They have a port there. Crimea is part of Russia. Ukraine is a state sponsor. The U.S. is not. And Turkey is. So we can see what is happening at this point. They're getting prepared and ready for war. They want to make sure they have control in the Black Sea. And this is why Turkey and Ukraine are working together in this area. Now, we understand there is a huge refugee problem all across Europe. We see refugees are moving into each country. Austria decided, you know what, we're only going to let a certain number of refugees into the country, and that is about it. In Germany, what they're doing there is they're going to be confiscating refugees' valuables in order to pay for their stay. In Denmark, they're planning to do the same thing. And they have a controversial bill, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take your funds, your valuables, and if you want to stay in the country, we will need to take these. So cash holdings and valuables can be secured by authorities if they are over 750 euros, which is $810, and if the person has an outstanding bill or is expected to have one. They're saying by confiscating the personal belongings of refugees, the states are implementing federal laws that require asylum seekers to use up their own resources before receiving state aid. Now, we know that Turkey released all these refugees to cause major problems with throughout Europe. And this was done on purpose under the instructions of the United States government central bankers, because we know over the years, Turkey has been building up refugees, keeping them there, waiting for the right moment to do this. And many people say this is one part of the agenda is to blur the cultural and national identity of the countries. Another one is to get Europe more involved in what's going on in Syria, a way to push them to bring troops in so we can stop the refugees. And we see that this is breaking the Eurozone completely apart. Each country now is saying, listen, the Schengen out the window. We are going to be controlling the borders at this point. Now, out in Libya, it seems that they have three governments now. And one is enough, but three? Wow. They have the one in Tripoli, they have the one in Tunisia, and they have the one off to the east, which is the puppet government of the United States government central bankers. And we have all three of these. But the only government that really exists is the one in Tripoli under the Constitution. All the others are fake. All the others were created by the UN, the United States, who wants to get back into Libya. And they're having a major problem doing this. They thought, oh, we'll just create this unity government, but they never really talked to the government in Tripoli. Actually, they rejected the plan, but they still went forward with it because they don't care what they think. They need to get back into Libya. Period. And we see right now that the U.S. military, along with the allies, they are getting ready for decisive action inside of Libya. Now remember, this didn't come out of nowhere. They just didn't decide, hey, you know what? Let's invade Libya. We just happen to have the troops ready. We just happen to have the fighter jets ready. We just happen to have all the military assets on standby. And we have this plan ready to go. No, this was planned from the beginning. We've been reporting on this, showing that the US, UK, Italy, Egypt, France, preparing for this for a very long time. And these are the things that we look at. This is what we are looking at to see what exactly are they doing. And they're trying to make it seem like the Islamic State just appeared out of nowhere. And now we need to go back into Libya. Well, no, they didn't appear out of nowhere. As they were losing the battle in Syria because of Russian forces, Qatar, Turkey, the United States, Saudi Arabia, they were airlifting the Islamic State out of Syria and bringing them into Libya. Because guess what? Russia cut off their funding. So what they do? They went into Libya and they went into the oil refineries, the ports, and they took control there to basically fund their operations. And when the people of Libya decided, hey, this can't happen, and they started to attack the Islamic State, the news broke that the Islamic State is attacking the oil refineries. No, they were giving to the Islamic State so they can continue their funding in Libya. And they tried to move into the Tripoli area to get more and more refineries, more and more oil to fund their operations. And they're using this whole propaganda scenario to go back into Libya. And this is what we're seeing right now. We see the U.S. is pushing forth troops into Iraq and into Syria. The U.S. State Department right now warned that Mosul Dam could collapse if the required resources are not available. So the water will immerse many cities, including Tikrit, Samarra, Mosul, and it will displace hundreds of thousands of people. And they're trying to push this agenda so everyone understands why they need to bring in more troops into this area. They're trying to make their case. And we see already they're accelerating boots on the ground. This is, of course, the strategy to get the Islamic State, but we know for a fact this is not the strategy to get to the Islamic State whatsoever. This strategy is to bring more and more ground troops into this area. And you have to ask, why? Well, Russia basically created a no-fly zone over Syria. And they have trouble flying to the west. They have trouble flying in the northern areas. They still can fly a little bit in the southern areas, because if Russia spots them hitting the infrastructure of Syria, guess what's going to happen? Assad forces, Russian forces, they're going to shoot down these planes. They know it. And they're going to be caught destroying infrastructure. So they're coming up with a new strategy. Their strategy is a safe zone. Their strategy is to bring in ground troops. Their strategy is a ground war at this time. This is the new strategy. Now, we realize that the U.S. and Turkey, they have been talking about securing the borders between Turkey and Syria for a very long time, and this is the first step into creating a safe zone. And we see right now, John Kerry is out there saying that the U.S.-led coalition has almost full control of the Turkish-Syrian border. And the reason why they need control of this is they need to make sure that the Islamic State can move in and out easily. They have full control over it. They're moving into Syria and increasing the amount of territory that they're taking. And they realize that Russia is helping Syria take over many of the bordering towns, and they're liberating them. And sooner than later, the Syrian forces are all going to occupy these areas, which are very close to the border. And Turkey right now, they are watching the Russian military very closely as it approaches their border. And they're saying that they're going to keep an eye on this because they want to see what they're doing, what they're planning. And we see right now that Turkey, along with the United States government central bankers, they are planning a ground invasion into Syria. Already, they have taken territory and they have invaded Syria. The Syrian government has formally appealed to the United Nations over incursions into its territory by Turkish troops. And they're saying they are bringing their troops into Syria without permission of the Syrian government, and they're firing at certain targets. And they're saying that Turkish military actions inside Syria threatens to escalate the internal conflict in the country and increase the threat of confrontation between Turkey and Russia. And they're doing this very close to this town called Jarablus, because that is still under the control of the Islamic State. And they've been bringing in military assets, they're bringing in supplies, continually helping the Islamic State. Now, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, he arrived in Istanbul to talk to Erdogan about the situation because they're finalizing their plans right now. They want to make sure everything is in order for this next offensive. And it's getting tougher and tougher as time goes on because what we're seeing right now, Russia and Syria, they are moving very quickly throughout Syria. They are destroying the Islamic State. The Islamic State is being pushed further and further east. And these talks at this point are kind of meaningless because Russia and Syria are going to have this whole area cleaned very, very soon. And the United States government central bankers, they realize this. Right now, Russian airstrikes, they've helped the Syrian government forces to launch offensives in 10 directions out of 15 for the first time since 2011. Right now, the Syrian army is preparing military operations in 3 more directions. So they have the upper hand. The U.S., Turkey, the terrorist groups, they don't. And they know this. Right now, the Syrian oppositions are saying, you know something? We're not going to negotiate because of what Russia is doing. They need to stop their airstrikes first. And once they stop, because they're killing civilians, they need to stop this and then we'll talk. Now, what they're really saying is, Russia, stop this because you're destroying our terrorist proxy army. And if you continue with this, we won't even be around to have talks with you. So we know right now that the U.S. only wanted the ceasefire to regroup. This is their whole point of it. And like I said, we knew eventually they weren't going to go forward with this. Already we see the peace talks are going to be postponed. The UN announced this yesterday. John Kerry is saying, well, we're going to go through the weekend. We're going to assess the whole situation, the progress over the weekend, and we'll come up with some type of decision later on to see if we should go forth with these talks. Maybe they'll be delayed 1, 2, maybe a week, maybe a month. We don't know for sure. Because they're going to assess the situation, how much ground they lost, what scenarios they can play out. And this is why we need to look at the situation very, very closely. Because the United States, they are backed against the wall right now. They're the ones who called for the ceasefire talks, and now they don't want to hand over the terrorist list of who's a terrorist, who's the opposition. They're delaying the talks. Russia's saying, let's do this. Let's have a ceasefire talk. Let's have a peace talk. Russia says no way is Assad stepping down, so that's not part of the talk. Of course, the U.S., Turkey, they all want that part of the agreement. But Russia has said time and time again, if Assad steps down, it's going to be by the people voting. It's not going to be by another government. But you can see the goal of the United States government central bankers, it hasn't changed. They still want Assad out. So what does this mean? What is the U.S. going to do next? Well, they've been planning this for a while. They're telling us about troops right now moving into Iraq and Syria. They're telling us that they're destroying the Islamic State, that they've commandeered an airbase. They're going to be using this airbase to bring in supplies, ammunition, military assets. What they're really doing behind the scenes of all of this is they're getting ready for a ground invasion. An invasion into Iraq, an invasion into Libya, an invasion into Syria. They're getting ready for an all-out war. And yes, this will include Ukraine. This is what they're pushing right now. And how are they going to start this? Well, we might see a big bang. We might see something happen in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya. We might see something happen here in the United States or throughout Europe to show that the Islamic State is still very dangerous, that we need to go into these countries. We have to remember, they've been using the Islamic State to make the case of why they are there. If Russia pushes and destroys the Islamic State and the other terrorist group, what reason does the United States and the coalition forces have to be in Syria? They can't come up with a reason. Why would they be in Iraq? So they need to keep the Islamic State around. They're not going to destroy it. They're not going to go after their own proxy army. They spent a lot of money on this. They spent a lot of time. So the next course of action is to create some type of an event, to create an incident that allows them to push their agenda. This is where we are at right now. And we will see this come very, very soon. Because we know the military assets are set up in Libya. We know they're set up in Iraq and Syria. We know they've brought in troops from the UK, from Germany, from other countries, the Arab nations. They've been getting ready for this for quite a while. This just didn't pop out of nowhere. They just didn't send over troops overnight. This has been planned. They are getting ready to light up the Middle East. It is going to be an all-out war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.